Business community says that Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address is largely positive. The president announced this unbundling of Eskom and says that they'll continue to introduce a range of measures to ignite economic activities and restore investor confidence. Well, joining me now at studio to look at this new plan is independent energy analyst Adil Nchabaleng. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
All right, so they talked about it, and last night the president said it's going to happen. We're splitting Eskom into three. Your immediate reaction to this?
Look, our immediate reaction is that, one, from our point of view, we've been expecting this because we did give an indication that there is a plan behind the scene over months ago to actually split Eskom. This didn't happen before. Now they found the opportune moment. What we actually picked up from the SONA is the aspect by which the agency of splitting Eskom before elections. What is the rush in such a matter that you have to split Eskom without even applying a due process by the Eskom Conversion Act of 2001? It is a company that is established by an act of law, which means Parliament has to be consulted. And that decision has to then be taken back, and Parliament has to engage its own constituencies in terms of various parties. So there is a bit of a conflict on that aspect of it. Secondary to it is the decision to split Eskom into three operational entities, systematically as well as operationally, is cumbersome and doesn't make sense. You already have a company that is struggling with costs. When you split it, it means each and every unit division has to bundle its own cost. And that cost process, you're going to have CEOs in three entities. You're going to have three CEOs in the, the executive board, as well as operations people. So it doesn't make sense unless there is a bigger plot and plan behind the unbundling, which has not yet come out.
All right. Well, you're concerned, but even more so is Labour, and this is what they had to say.
Yes, as NUMSA, we are rejecting the president's proposal. In fact, about 2 weeks ago, we issued a statement because already it seemed clear that this is where the state was heading, based on statements which had been issued by various ministers, that the ANC government's plans to rescue Eskom involved breaking it up into compartments, generation, transmission, and Distribution, thank you. And we rejected those plans outright. We've done that because we know that once that breakup occurs, that is exactly the process that they will use to privatize Eskom. And privatization has shown us in the past that it results in massive job losses. It is not beneficial for the consumer because it results in higher prices.
All right. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I mean, the decision has been taken. No workers have been consulted. The board doesn't even know what was going to happen. The decision was made by government, which is the head of state, and 5 consultants, which one of them is one of the guys involved in energy, So the process itself is very confusing because you are supposed to take the process by which, if the president says, look, in December I appointed an Eskom task team. The task team by process is supposed to actually produce a report. Within the report, it must be interrogated, must be subjected to public scrutiny. And after public scrutiny, then the decision can then be laid to a decision by government. But there's not been any of those processes. 5 consultants made a decision to unbundle Eskom on the basis that we had a power shortages as well as blackouts in December, which was something that didn't make sense. December, we were in a crisis, load shedding. January, you come. After January, just on the 6th and 7th, we're already sitting with unbundling of Eskom.
So, Ada, let me understand then. What's the difference between unbundling and restructuring? Because Eskom Holdings will still own all three, right? So isn't it just a restructuring of the entity?
It's not a restructuring. When they're talking unbundling, they're talking about separating assets so that they are made ready to be sold. And when you sell those Escoms, the current plan is to actually have each and every unit power station sold independently out of Eskom. So when you're saying you're unbundling, it's just another fancy term of saying we're privatizing, because the generation component will be identified as a separate asset. And then in there, you can now start diving into the key assets that you want to do a fire sale on. Secondary to it, the transmission. We've got 384,000 kilometers of transmission as well as distribution lines. what are you going to do with those lines? I mean, they're sitting on land, and land is a premium thing and a most actually argued issue in South Africa. Are you going to sell that land that Eskom is sitting with on transmission and distribution? So when you're breaking it up, it is not necessary. It's been operating within minimum costs, generating around 32 cents as we're speaking, within 3 units already. So already within Eskom, there is divisions that looks at generation, transmission, as well as distribution. So why would you have a need under an holdings entity to still try and define departments or separate companies when you're actually just going to do an unnecessary, really useless
So are
process?
job losses inevitable?
Job losses are going to happen. The minute we go into a rationalization process like they're doing in unbundling, it means they're going to now start looking at the head count, the contribution in terms of the headcount value. And based on that, they are going to start actually chopping heads. They are going to outsource some of the functions. They are going to now make sure that they introduce new companies that are coming in to take over the jobs that were done by Eskom employees. Because at this stage, 90,000 people, if we only look at the current 13 to about 16 power stations currently in operation today, if you start now doing a rationalization of generation, selling out of assets, it means almost 90,000 people are going to be out of jobs. The whole Mpumalanga economy on coal will be crushed and sunk. And you will have a situation whereby the economy and the job losses in South Africa are going to be exacerbated. We already have unemployment at the highest rate.
But doesn't the rationale the president laid out make sense in terms of each entity will be more focused on costs and dealing with the issues around Eskom?
It's already focused within Eskom. It is just the aspect of mismanagement as well as the activities that has been going on, fraudulent activities like signing up IPPs which are illegal. It was a fraudulent activity that should have been stopped and should have been challenged, because the money that Eskom is suffering with and cannot recover on a daily basis is money that they're putting away. 94 million rands is paid out as a loss, and you're not even recovering it in terms of revenue. So that poses a massive, serious challenge to Eskom. So you release the independent power stations, make them sit independently and generate independent income. You have sorted out the problem. Eskom now has its own basket of income, and it can actually regenerate its own capacity to operate, as well as reinvest in terms of its own assets, instead of subsidizing IPPs. So that's where the complexity of it comes in. And most people don't understand it. And I think the task team didn't make the president understand that this is going to be a challenging task. And the challenging task is the unions are going to be up in arms. The workers of Eskom's, whose actually livelihood and jobs are at stake, are going to be up in arms. Us, as civil society, as well as in the private sector, looking at the opportunities that are going to be lost, we're going to be up in arms. So why would you take a process by which it disadvantages the majority poor in a South African context? So it is not a wise decision.
NUMSA also said that this is going to see price hikes. Is that something that might happen?
Obviously, because each and every unit now must actually add its own margin towards the production of electricity, which is generation, transmission, as well as distribution. And in there, each and every unit must make its own profit if it is going to be expected to be profitable. By the way, the Eskom Conversion Act of 2001 does not say Eskom should operate at a profit. It says Eskom must produce electricity at a cheap cost.
And they're not doing that.
And they haven't done that, so.
All right, Adel, we can talk about this for great length, but thanks very much indeed for bringing your insights to us. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you so much.